Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is Susan Ward. I'm with the Bureau of Student Wellness with the New Hampshire Department of Education. And thank you so much for joining us this early Tuesday morning on our Facebook Live coffee chat. And we also will have, for another couple of weeks or another week or two, losing track of time, we'll be also doing our 3 p.m. afternoon bell sessions. So please make sure you stay tuned for both of those times, each weekday morning and each weekday afternoon. And today we're going to discuss mental health issues during remote learning and why students and families may be disengaged, and some of those things to consider for the summer and for the next academic year. So in looking at the experiences of remote learning these past few months, we've seen educators provide instruction while also really focusing on the mental health of their students. And we've also seen school counselors and school psychologists really turn their attention to provide ethical services while using technology such as telehealth and using social emotional lessons with students. And being able to reach students that are at risk for experiencing abuse and neglect has really been a huge concern. And there's little doubt that many families have increased mental health issues due to the pandemic and having to do remote learning, not being socially and physically distant from other friends and family. But these effects really aren't equally distributed. In schools that are in low socioeconomic areas, or if they're schools that have limited resources, they may be experiencing some greater issues than other districts. So some things to really reflect on and to consider in going forward is that students that are already dealing with executive functioning issues have really had to change their way of dealing with and understanding instruction. Concentration issues are really exacerbated by a variety of factors. Heightened anxiety and stress is basically an enemy of executive functioning. It's really important for educators to mediate tasks for their middle and high school age children with ADHD, and if those students are having any other executive functioning or learning disabilities. And some things that teachers have been doing are having the students use checklists, calendars, and even though some of these students may have been taught to use some of these techniques and tools before, it's important to teach these students how to use them at home as well. And maybe even getting families involved in how to work together to really support that student that has some of those executive functioning issues. There may also be other obstacles that keep students from engaging in remote learning. And many reasons students for students that may not be engaging. These could be situations where a parent is an essential worker or has gone back to work and there's really little supervision in the home. There may also be a situation where an older sibling is taking care of one or more younger siblings and doesn't have the skills or ability to really assist their siblings or have the opportunity to engage in remote learning. Schools and districts must structure directions and expectations for parents who may have difficulty understanding or using technology. Some children are being raised by grandparents that might find it a real challenge to use this technology or assist their grandchildren in using the multiple sites or all features of the Google Classroom or whatever platform is being used. Some families also have multiple children and one computer. And that one computer may also be for that parent that has to work at home. So these are only some of the scenarios that might be happening in our districts. There are definitely many other scenarios that might be keeping students from not being able to access that remote instruction on a computer. And we also should take a look at student-teacher relationships. If the relationship wasn't strong in the classrooms, students may not see that value in continuing to engage in remote learning. Face-to-face interactions between schools and families that may have been regular and frequent before really now need that multimodal methods of communication. Stress and trauma, those are other factors to consider. Students might be undergoing trauma at home and then added stress on adults definitely doesn't help the situation, especially if there's parents struggling, if there's someone ill at home, if they've lost their job, if there are money issues. All of that stress on the parent can definitely trickle down to the children as well. And if a child's under extreme stress, it's very difficult for them to learn in that environment. And that's where we can actually refer to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And children may be in situations where they're not getting their basic needs met. Therefore, engaging in school and learning is just not an option at this time. Also, when discussing stress and anxiety, we may want to consider the parent and if he or she has had negative school experiences in the past. And switching to remote learning can actually be a trigger for some of those negative experiences. Some parents may not even have the best living situations, and inviting teachers and educators and counselors into their dining rooms or living rooms might cause that parent to experience shame and to actually even just shut down. And we really need to look at the inequities. There are families that are living in remote areas that don't have internet access. There are families that are not able to afford internet or a computer. There's also that sense of shame on the parents if they're embarrassed to communicate that to schools. And this might make them want to just avoid the conversation, use some, avoiding coping skills that aren't necessarily healthy, and therefore they're avoiding communication with teachers and the school altogether. Remote learning has really shifted the way we work with students. And it's really important to consider leading with mental health in mind when working with students and families. And we're working with students, it's really important to create an environment where having any kind of emotion is supported, whether that's a negative emotion, whether that's where a child's having a very difficult time, if they're shutting down, really want to support those emotions and let those students know that, we're definitely there to support and listen and understand. So using a reflective response when dealing with a child that's stressed or upset will allow that child to feel like he or she is being heard. So maybe using a message, a reflective response, such as, I can see you're really upset that you're having difficulty in this class. I can tell because, you're not really engaging today, and I understand that this is hard. I can see that you're really frustrated by doing this. And at that moment, that's when we get that child to feel like they're heard, affirming their feelings and realizing, yes, this person really understands what I'm saying. And that can really be helpful. And that's really what they're looking for, is just someone to really reflect on what's happening and acknowledge. Also reminding students to look at what you can control and what you can't control. So reassure while being sensitive to students' needs, be flexible to everyone having different circumstances, and some may not be comfortable sharing their circumstances. And this might be a time where you kind of give some examples of how you've adapted your own behavior, and reminding them that, there are definitely things we can't control, such as remote learning or receiving our instruction through Google Classroom. What we can't control is how we feel about it, how we think about it, and how we deal with it. And reminding students that they do have a sense of control over some of these things. And that's important when they're feeling like this isn't in my control and I'm frustrated. So really opening up and having these conversations with students can just make sure they know they're being heard and their feelings are affirmed. And creating a space to promote social emotional learning. Encourage students to talk about their feelings around the situation, COVID-19, brainstorming strategies everyone can use to care for themselves and others. And students and children can practice these opportunities at home when they're engaging in family activities, encouraging parents to recognize when their child is showing patience or flexibility, and really praising these children for showing these social emotional skills. Sorry, I'm clicking around. Um, and some school counselors the end of this academic year may have moved in school counseling to doing the appointments online, especially for students who are already set up with their counselors and having meetings in school with guidance counselors, psychologists, um, and removing those appointments to remote telehealth can really help maintain that sense of stability. And that's something to look for when going forward. I know none of us know what September will bring us, but if it hasn't been done now, really making sure that's something to consider when working with some of our students who are already seeking counseling. And this is a time where students will really need to rely on the use of those coping skills. And if their toolbox is empty, that can be really difficult. So if students have a full toolbox full of coping skills, relaxation techniques, or mindfulness activities, and really recognize when to use those skills, they'll eventually be able to use them on their own. So it might benefit these students to include parents in any online counseling sessions, as the family is really a system and they're all working together. They're all in the home together. They're working as a unit. So teaching parents these same skills will really help them learn how to guide their children in using the skills, using the same language that you've been using with students if you're a counselor. You might find yourself being a guide to parents to help them teach not only some of these coping skills and when to use them, but maybe helping students stay organized, and maybe teaching the parents to help teach their kiddos with some planning and organizational skills that have worked with them in the school and in the classroom that you've already been working with them in. Managing schoolwork supplies, creating homework bins, creating schedules, anything that you've been working with them at home might help to just include the family so everyone can be supported. All the same languages being used and all of those same tools and techniques can carry over to the home. So another thing to consider is like teaching some of these students and families how to maybe manage their workspaces, their school supplies, and then just even having a visual display of the calendar, clock, checklists, timers, anything that's really being used at school. And then also consider setting up a digital mental health tool for students, since many K through 12 schools may not have the capacity to really take on new appointments with more struggling students, especially since guidance departments may be still struggling with connecting with some of those students remotely and creating that disengaged student environment, the environment for disengaged students to connect with. Creating that online therapy portal might help meet the demand for students or families or parents that are reaching out. And if possible, creating a centralized source of mental health resources, that can be an effective strategy for many different ways to just help a lot of families at once. And administrators and staff should consider creating a virtual social opportunity for students, extracurricular clubs, whether it's a virtual social club, a math league, or an at-home workout group for sports teams, can really contribute to meeting some of those needs. And using a virtual platform can help connect students who haven't been able to connect physically. And although the school year is really wrapping up, summer camps or summer school programs are not happening or may be delayed or canceled. So this is really a great way to consider continuing some of these virtual opportunities, whether it's through a summer school program or a virtual camp. And guidance counselors are definitely reaching out to parents about detecting any early warning signs of mental illness. And if not, then they should be having these discussions with parents and families and other supervisors and colleagues, especially during this area of social distancing. And then if an adolescent or teenage student is withdrawn or despondent or really begin to complain of some chronic issues, it's definitely a sign of mental distress. And, really connecting with these families and getting parents involved is really important, so they can consider reaching out for other resources. And then when looking at the future of remote learning and what it might entail for summer months or the fall, it's really important to develop a long-term recovery plan when looking at the next academic year. And I know many districts are already doing that. And although it's difficult to know week by week what's going to happen and what September will look like with it being so many months away, a team of people or a task force should be really looking at how to implement a plan addressing not only the academic needs, but also the behavioral needs to all students in each school. So making sure there's time and ways to assess. So needs assessments that identify specific challenges students will face will really guide any interventions that would be put into place. And then ongoing assessments. That's important, as some students or staff might be or seem fine once they're returning to any kind of routine that may have been taking place on site. Sometimes people will have setbacks, whether that is an educator, whether that is a student. So it's really important to continue to assess to see if any other interventions really need to be put into place. And then a resource map. So identifying qualified mental and behavioral health providers in each school, and really identify those gaps to possibly work with community supports to fill any of those gaps. More students are really going to be needing some of those mental health supports than in past academic years when returning to any kind of academic structure in the fall. So making sure supports are in place for those students, and with a plan and a resource map, being able to quickly identify those mental and behavioral health providers is going to hopefully allow all educators to point these students in the right direction. And then community mental health providers will also be experiencing an increase in demand. So providing professional development to educators about trauma-informed practices and other mental health guidance will really be important. Educators are going to be responsible for recognizing the signs of anxiety, depression, trauma, and really developing those strong supports for students in need. So they may need to consider being a little bit more flexible with lessons, or providing and promoting some self-care and incorporating that into the school day. So there's a lot of different things to consider when looking at what going back to school or starting the new academic year might look like, as it's, again, unknown until we get closer to that time. So some final thoughts. So parents and students and teachers have definitely been in uncharted waters for the past 3 months, doing remote learning and working in a structure that no one saw coming. So families need supportive, positive, encouraging messaging to effectively facilitate learning at home. Families will definitely struggle to keep up with the remote learning if there's rigidity, pressure, if they're feeling like they're not getting their needs met, or depending on the communication, they might be feeling like they want to disengage as well. So it's important to consider that. And then encouraging meaningful ways family can incorporate learning into the home in fun ways, and keeping it fun and flexible and adaptable, and feeling like it's easy to um, engage their children in different fun activities will also help them stay engaged. And then using an approach that encourages partnership with the school, or partnership with teachers, and a space for compassion, and really responding with those reflective messages when parents or families are struggling. So lots of things to consider as far as what this summer will look like, communication between family and schools, and planning for what the next academic year will look like. So these are great discussions to have amongst team members, colleagues, parents, families, educators, school counselors. There are so many things to consider. And we always love reading your comments, and hopefully you're able to have some of these discussions with other people that are in your family, in your school, and we'd love to hear them or see them as well. So feel free to add your comments and maybe get a discussion going. And then please join us again this afternoon for the afternoon bell at 3 p.m. And then for the rest of the week, we will be continuing our morning coffee chats at 9 and our afternoon bell session at 3. And at the bottom of the screen, you will notice our Facebook page, New Hampshire Student Wellness. And then our YouTube channel goes live at 3. So if you are not able to see our 3 p.m. afternoon bell session on Facebook, please go to our YouTube channel, NH Student Wellness, and you will be able to catch us live there. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see some of your comments and see you again soon. Thank you so much.